So can you just share your experience with that and also the steps that you recommend for managing stress in a relationship?
So clearly we're under a lot of stress, just like a lot of people are. And my husband has done a really beautiful job of being really responsive to my stress. So there have been obviously a lot of moments where I've either thrown little temper tantrums or been crying at my desk. And he does this great job of doing a lot of the things that I tell couples to do, right? So at this moment where he found me crying at my desk, he walked into the room, he kept his body really calm, and you could kind of just see it, right? Like he took a deep breath and his shoulders were relaxed, and he, slowly walked over, and I remember he kind of just looked at me and was like, what's going on? So he opened it up with a really open-ended question. A lot of times what we do when we see people stressed or upset is we kind of close it off by restricting it right away, right? So he could have walked in and said, why are you crying? Don't cry. Nothing's wrong. It's all going to be okay. But, he kneeled down, he took my hand, so he was physically affectionate, and he really slowed things down while we were talking and listened and asked lots of questions and validated me. And then at the end of the conversation, he was able to help me think of a way forward, right? So it's really good to wait to give advice, but sometimes we still want to know what is the way forward. And, he did a really good job of offering some suggestions, but also listening to what I thought and letting me know that he would be supportive. And so this all wraps in. I know one of the things you were wondering is what are some things couples can do to support each other when they're stressed? And one of the biggest things is to calm your own body, which is really, really hard right now because both people might be feeling stressed. So what can you do in those moments where maybe you recognize, yeah, we're both stressed, but this person is a 10 out of 10 and I'm a 6. So can I take some deep breaths and calm my body? That's called co-regulation. When you regulate yourself, you actually help somebody else regulate themselves. Pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
And you see that with moms and babies. And then the other thing that's really important is allowing the other person to, I always describe people that are stressed as being kind of like a balloon. They are so filled with air that if you just start shoving more at them, so solutions or telling them not to feel upset, you're putting more air into their balloon. And what happens if we overfill a balloon? It pops, right? And that doesn't feel good for anybody. So what is really important is that a partner is able to drag the air out. And you do that by being quiet, by asking really helpful, open-ended questions like, what's most upsetting to you? What are you worried about? What is this making you think? So just really allowing that person to let all of that air out of their is really, really validating, right? My husband was able to say to me, this makes so much sense that you're upset. I think at one moment he was like, I'm so upset for you, right? Like he was like, I want to cry for you because I understand why you're upset. And that validation feels so good because then you're not in it alone. And then really being able to withhold problem solving until the end. When we offer suggestions, we think it's going to help. Usually it actually just makes people feel worse. And I'm sure you both have experienced that before, where you're telling a story and somebody's, well, didn't you just try to do X, Y, and Z? And you're like, if I could have tried that, I would have.
Yeah. We're always trying to fix people. It's our worst and best characteristics.
It comes from a really loving place.
Yeah.
And it makes people's balloons pop.
Right.
So really withholding that problem solving, but then also offering ways to move forward, right? We don't want to stay stuck forever. So it can feel helpful to have a friend or a partner or a family member who says, I'm not going to offer you solutions, but what would be helpful right now? Like, do you want to talk about ideas?
That's good.
Do you want my ideas? Do you want to tell me your ideas? Is there something I could do for you? So really opening up the floor of what moving forward could look like.
Yeah. And I noticed that I have been a lot better about this, but one thing that would trigger my partner when I would notice he was a little eggy or stressed, I would ask the question, what's wrong? And that seemed to trigger him because it's almost like a negative, like something must be wrong with him then, if I'm asking that question. And I think that was triggering.
Yeah.
So
just kind of like, what's your problem is another one that's triggering too, right? Like, what's the problem? Somebody walks in and they have a look on their face and you go, what's the problem? And
it's almost like you're saying like, what now? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And of course I don't mean it that way. I mean it like how, like I'm trying to be supportive, but it comes off to him as something is wrong with him, and I'm noticing
just the word
that
wrong.
something's wrong.
Yeah.
I think
Absolutely.
more open-ended of saying, even just saying it in a way like, how are you doing? Something a little more neutral.
Yeah. Like, what's going on? How are you doing today? I think sometimes even saying what's wrong, but maybe having a little more of a lead in, like, hey, I can tell something's up. What's wrong? What's up? In some way, kind of making it a little more open-ended can be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.